What role does technology play in creating media bias? Technology plays an important role in the way we consume journalism today. It also is an important way that we experience the world. So it's, I think, important for us to understand how media operate and what ways that media affect our thinking and shape our worldview. In an earlier video, I mentioned two important figures in this study of media. One was Neil Postman and the other was Marshall McLuhan. Neil Postman wrote two important books, one called Amusing Ourselves to Death and another called Technopoly. And in those books, Neil Postman said that all media have limitations and capabilities. He used the example of smoke signals. He said that smoke signals can communicate a great deal. They can tell you where I am. They can tell you that I want to communicate with you. If we've worked out a code, we might even be able to communicate some simple messages that way. However, smoke signals are not going to be able to communicate with you my philosophy, my theology, my loves, my hates, my fears. It's going to take a more sophisticated technology or face-to-face interaction before you really understand those things about me. Neil Postman goes on to say that all technologies, no matter how sophisticated, also have limitations, and that it's important that we don't depend upon those technologies, no matter how sophisticated they are, to give us a full and complete picture of the world. Neil Postman then goes on to say that because that's true, what we experience through these technologies is inherently biased. It inherently leaves out certain important aspects of the world. It frames the world in a particular way. The second guy that I want to introduce to you in a little bit more detail today is Marshall McLuhan. Marshall McLuhan used a metaphor that I sometimes call McLuhan's light bulb to communicate this idea. Marshall McLuhan, for example, asked the question, what happened if you would walk into a room that was pitch black, but perhaps you could hear that something was in the room? You could hear people breathing, or you could just hear a rustle of activity within that room. What would your behavior be? Marshall McLuhan said your behavior would likely be very cautious. If you chose to move around that room at all, you would likely have to use your hands in order to do so in that pitch black room. However, if the light bulb went off in that room and you could see that the room was filled with people who were benign or possibly even friendly and that there were no dangers in that room, your behavior would radically and instantaneously change. Marshall McLuhan then would ask this question: what changed about the room? Did the contents of the room change? They did not. Did the medium by which you experienced that content change? Yeah, that's what really changed, and it dramatically affected your experience of that reality. Marshall McLuhan says that the same is true for all media, that when we experience the world via the written page versus a video, that is a very different experience of the world. So I introduced Marshall McLuhan and Neil Postman to you simply to say this: when we are consuming media, and increasingly we are consuming media in electronic formats these days, we've got to be very, very careful about understanding what both the capabilities and the limitations of those technologies are. We've got to be really careful that we don't expect journalism to deliver to us more than it is able, and we've especially got to be careful that we understand what's being put into a story, and more importantly, again, what's being left out.